On a cold winter afternoon in Boston, gray clouds had begun to block the sunlight early. Olivia Morrison left the old Victorian-style office building and walked briskly, shrinking against the cold wind. A small anxiety welled up in her chest as she headed toward her family home. Family dinner this weekend. The text message from her mother Eleanor was, as always, brief and commanding. Olivia sighed deeply as she returned her smartphone to her coat pocket. Her business, Morrison Consulting, appeared to be a small management consulting firm tucked away in a corner of Boston. A modest logo on the window glass, a simple office employing just one secretary and 2 assistants. Few people knew its true nature. Without changing her expression, Olivia got out of a taxi in front of a famous hotel and headed toward Chestnut Hill, the upscale residential area where her parents lived. Her clothing was high quality but not flashy, her hairstyle a simple bob, and her makeup subtle. Her parents' words, practical and unimaginative, always repeated in her mind. When she arrived at the Morrison mansion, she could already hear her sister Grace's voice from the entrance. Grace was a self-proclaimed avant-garde artist. Her works rarely sold, but thanks to financial support from her parents, Grace enjoyed a free life in the art community. Livy. You finally made it. When Olivia opened the front door, Grace, wearing a vibrant orange dress, greeted her with open arms. Peculiar accessories she claimed to have made herself gleamed at her neck and wrists. Sorry I'm late, work ran long, Olivia smiled softly. That boring consulting work again? Don't you get tired of all those numbers? Grace giggled as she took her sister's arm. Mom and Dad are waiting in the living room. In the living room, her father Howard sat in an expensive leather chair in front of the fireplace, watching the news with a whiskey in hand. He had once made a name for himself in the real estate industry, but experienced a major failure 10 years ago. The details were never discussed within the family. Olivia, you're finally here, Howard said without taking his eyes off the screen. Not on time as usual. She was busy with work, Howard, Eleanor said, coming out of the kitchen. Eleanor wore a perfect hairstyle and an elegant 2-piece outfit. But is it more important than our precious time together? Olivia silently bowed her head. She knew any excuse would be futile. Livy works really hard, Grace came to her defense. Running a small business is difficult. More like clerical work than business, Howard said as he took a sip. Organizing numbers and advising small companies. No ambition. Eleanor agreed as she arranged dishes on the table. You're always too practical, Olivia. You need to enjoy life more. Look at Grace. She lives with passion. Mom, don't say that, Grace protested, but her eyes shone with pleasure. Dinner began, and conversation naturally shifted to Grace's latest art project and her dreams for a seaside town in California. Someday I'll live in a house overlooking the ocean and paint in the morning sun. In such an environment, I'm sure I could create wonderful pieces, Grace said, her eyes sparkling. Her parents listened enthusiastically to their daughter's talk, but quickly changed the subject whenever Olivia's work came up. Though no one noticed, behind Olivia's quiet eyes was a calculated coolness. She occasionally checked her smartphone and sent brief messages. These weren't just work communications but instructions regarding the final stage of a major deal. There will be a lovely surprise for Christmas, Eleanor suddenly declared toward the end of dinner. Her gaze was directed at Grace. Especially for you. Oh. What is it? Tell me. Grace rejoiced like a child. It's still a secret, Howard said with a laugh. And Olivia, you'll be coming too, right? Don't use work as an excuse like you always do. Olivia smiled mildly. Of course I'll come. I have plans for Christmas too. As December arrived, Boston was adorned with Christmas decorations. From the window of Olivia Morrison's office, she could see Boston Common glittering with illuminations in the falling snow. She stood by the window, a coffee cup in hand, gazing into the distance. Ms. Morrison, documents have arrived from San Diego. Please give them a final check. Her secretary Janet entered the room, bringing Olivia back to the present. She turned around and accepted the thick stack of documents. "Thank you, Janet. Now everything is ready." Olivia smiled quietly as she reviewed the documents. Behind the facade of a small consulting company, she was proceeding with the acquisition of Coastal Properties, the real estate company that had once driven her father Howard to the brink of bankruptcy. After 10 years of accumulating power in the shadows, Olivia was finally about to realize her moment. The final contract will be completed next Friday morning, Christmas Eve. All property rights transfers will happen simultaneously, Janet confirmed. "Perfect. I have one more special instruction regarding the property along the Malibu coast." Olivia wrote a small memo and handed it to Janet. Her expression was calm, but in her eyes burned fierce determination. Meanwhile, at the Morrison mansion, Eleanor was meeting with an interior designer. She gave detailed instructions on decorating the large Christmas tree, preparing for a special night. "This Christmas is special," Eleanor told the designer. "We're preparing a wonderful surprise for our daughter." Howard was in his study, talking on the phone with a real estate agent. "Yes, a house overlooking the ocean in Malibu. Price is not an issue. I'll pay anything to fulfill Grace's dream." He nodded with satisfaction as he stared at the property photos spread out on his desk. The luxurious mansion facing the sea seemed like the perfect environment for his aspiring artist daughter. In their eyes, this present appeared to be the greatest gift to help Grace's talent blossom. Meanwhile, Grace was finishing small pieces for a Christmas market at a friend's studio. Her fingertips were colorful with paint, and her bright smile warmly illuminated the room. "I'm going back home this weekend for a family gathering," Grace told her friend. "Mother said there would be a big announcement. I wonder if it's Dad's retirement party or something." "Your parents really cherish you," her friend said enviously. Grace shrugged. "They're a bit hard on Olivia, though. My sister has talent, but she's always too practical. Our parents want her to lead a more exciting life. But she has her own successful company, right?" "Yes, a small one. But my sister seems to think only about numbers and practical matters. I wish she'd enjoy life more." Contrary to these words, Olivia was steadily shaping her own dreams through her work. While her parents doted on Grace, Olivia had quietly but surely been walking a path to realize her grand ambitions. A week before Christmas Eve, Olivia received a call from her father. "Olivia, make sure you come home on Christmas Eve." Howard's voice had an unusual excitement. "This year is special. The whole family needs to be together." "Of course I'll be there," Olivia answered. "I'm looking forward to it." After hanging up, a small smile appeared on Olivia's lips. On her computer screen were documents for the final stage of the Coastal Properties acquisition. As Christmas week began, Olivia became even busier. She worked day and night, focusing all her energy on the final adjustments for the acquisition. The small Christmas tree in her office had been decorated by her secretary Janet. "Ms. Morrison, have you thought about a Christmas present for yourself?" Janet asked. Olivia laughed out loud, something she rarely did. "Yes, something I've been waiting for years. A kind of justice, you might say." The day before Christmas Eve, Olivia flew to San Diego. There she met with the former CEO of Coastal Properties and completed the signing of the final contract. With this, all assets, including the high-end Coastal Properties in California, became Olivia's. "Ms. Morrison, it's rare for a young woman like you to be so successful," the former CEO said admiringly. "Especially in our industry." Olivia shook hands matter-of-factly. "Gender has nothing to do with business. It's just about making the right decisions at the right time." Back in Boston, Olivia carefully packed her bags. She planned to spend Christmas Eve at her parents' house. At the bottom of her suitcase were documents gathered over 10 years, evidence of Howard's past humiliation. But she wouldn't need to take them out. Tomorrow, everything would be conveyed in words. That night, lying in bed, Olivia imagined tomorrow's events. Her parents presenting that Malibu house to her sister. And her family's expressions when they discovered the house was already hers. Olivia felt a twinge of guilt at the unexpected turn of events. But the humiliation of being called practical and unimaginative for 10 years outweighed that guilt. "Tomorrow will be a special day in my life too," Olivia whispered. On Christmas Eve evening, as Olivia stood in front of the Morrison family entrance, she paused for a moment. The door decorated with a luxurious wreath, warm light leaking from the windows. She could hear family voices. She reached into her coats in her pocket and checked her smartphone. The last email read, "All completed. Congratulations, Ms. Morrison." She took a deep breath, composed her face to remove any emotion, and knocked on the door. "Livy." Grace welcomed her, almost jumping at her. "You finally came. We were about to start." As she entered the living room, a huge Christmas tree glittered in the corner, and decorated stockings hung above the fireplace. Eleanor held a champagne glass, and Howard sat in his armchair by the fireplace, drinking what he said was a special brandy he'd been saving. "Finally here," Howard said. "Late as usual." "Traffic was heavy," Olivia answered concisely and kissed her mother on the cheek. "Have some champagne," Eleanor offered her daughter a glass. "Tonight will be a special night." Her eyes were shining with excitement, and her gaze moved between Grace and Olivia. There was a joy full of secrets, especially when looking at Grace. "Shall we have dinner now?" Eleanor suggested. "And then exchange presents." The elaborately decorated dining table was filled with traditional Christmas dishes, roast turkey, gratins, vegetable casseroles, homemade bread, and more. Howard said grace before the meal, the family toasted, and dinner began. Conversation was mainly occupied by Grace's artistic activities and Howard's golf talk. Olivia's work was briefly mentioned but quickly moved on to other topics. She didn't seem to mind and continued eating calmly. "Now, time for presents," Howard stood up after finishing the Christmas pudding dessert. "Let's go to the living room." With everyone gathered around the tree, Howard began to distribute presents with dramatic gestures. First came the exchange of small gifts. Grace gave Olivia a handmade scarf, and Olivia gave Grace a set of high-quality art supplies. Eleanor and Howard also exchanged small gifts with each other and their daughters. But the main event had not yet arrived. "Now, time for the special presents," Howard said, his eyes gleaming. He brought out 2 boxes from behind the fireplace. One was large, the other very small. "This is for Olivia," he handed her the smaller box. In that moment, a subtle smile crossed his face. Olivia quietly opened the box. Inside was a worn white sock and a small note. Without looking up, she read the note. "Live modestly," it said in her father's handwriting. "Olivia, luxury doesn't suit you," Howard said with a laugh. "This is what suits you, practical and sensible." The living room fell silent for a moment. Eleanor laughed a bit uncomfortably, and Grace looked confused. "Thank you, Dad," Olivia responded calmly. "It's a very thought-provoking gift." Just a joke," Howard laughed, but his laughter lacked confidence. "Now, Grace. This is the real surprise." The large box was handed to Grace. She opened it eagerly, her eyes shining like a child's, tearing away the wrapping paper. Inside the box was a smaller box and a thick folder of documents. "This is..." Grace opened the small box to find a key. She opened the folder with a puzzled expression. "A house in Malibu, California." She looked at her parents with disbelief. Eleanor stood up with tears in her eyes and embraced Grace. "We just wanted to make your dream come true," she said emotionally. "The house by the sea you always talked about." Howard also stood up, glass in hand. "A house overlooking the Malibu Ocean. I want you to let your talent bloom in the best environment." Grace was speechless, staring at the photos of the house while flipping through the documents. The mansion was luxurious, a 3-story modern design. Large windows overlooked the Pacific Ocean, and there was an open deck on the roof. "This is unbelievable," Grace said, crying. So expensive, but I don't have money. The maintenance costs. We'll take care of everything, Howard declared. You have talent. We want to give you the environment to nurture it. Olivia watched this scene quietly with a smile. Her expression was unreadable, but a strange light dwelled in her eyes. That's wonderful, she said to Grace. Congratulations. Your dream has come true. Olivia, you wouldn't understand the value of these things, Howard said. Always chasing numbers, without dreams. Howard. Eleanor restrained her husband. Tonight is a night of celebration. Olivia nodded silently. She quietly placed the sock and memo in her coat pocket. Next week, let's all go to Malibu, Eleanor suggested. To see the new house. Olivia, you can come too, right? Of course, Olivia answered. I'll make time. As the night wore on, Grace was thrilled, looking at photos of the house with her parents and getting excited about future plans. Olivia stood a little apart, looking at the snowy scene outside the window. Will you really come? Grace approached her sister. Her voice was tinged with guilt. After being spoken to so rudely, aren't you upset? Olivia turned around and smiled gently. Don't worry. I'm fine. Our parents sometimes say terrible things. But they love you. They just don't know how to express it. I understand, Olivia replied. Congratulations on your new house. I'm looking forward to it. Grace smiled with relief and hugged her sister. Livy, you're always so strong. If I were treated like that, I would have cried. That's the difference between us, Olivia said quietly. But next week will surely be an interesting development. Grace couldn't understand the meaning of those words but thought it was just a conversation closer. Inwardly, Olivia was imagining the conclusion of next week's family trip. The moment when the truth would be revealed in the Malibu mansion. Late that night, before Olivia got into a taxi, Howard stopped her at the entrance. The present was just a joke, he said, looking a bit uncomfortable. You're not taking it to heart, are you? Of course not, Dad, Olivia answered. You've always thought I could take a joke, haven't you? Howard laughed with relief. Grace is special. She has talent. You understand, right? I understand perfectly, Olivia replied. Good night, Dad. As she got into the taxi, Olivia took out her smartphone and sent a short message, proceeding as planned. Prepare for Malibu next week. In the taxi driving through the snowy streets of Boston, Olivia's face showed determination. The note saying, "Live modestly," was in her pocket, but contrary to those words, her life was now beginning to move dramatically. A week later, the Morrison family landed at Los Angeles International Airport. Eleanor immediately took out a small mirror and fixed her hair. Howard impatiently checked his watch while waiting for the luggage. Grace was too excited to stay still, her hand trembling as she gripped her carry-on. And Olivia stood behind the family with her usual calm expression. I've arranged for a rental car, Olivia said. It should be waiting outside the airport. You're always so practical, Eleanor said. But it's helpful this time. Outside the airport, a luxury SUV was waiting as reserved. Howard sat in the driver's seat, and after the rest of the family got in, they headed to Malibu. In the car, Grace exclaimed with admiration at the scenery visible through the window. It's even more wonderful than I imagined. This light. This air. I could create amazing works here. Eleanor looked at her daughter with satisfaction. It will be a place where your talent can bloom. After about a 2-hour drive, they arrived at an upscale residential area in Malibu. Passing through the gate, a magnificent mansion facing the sea appeared. The 3-story white modern architecture gleamed, reflecting the sunlight. Is this really my house? Grace gasped. Indeed it is, Howard said proudly. A place worthy of you. As they got out of the car, a sophisticated woman greeted them at the entrance. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to Malibu. I'm Sharon Carter, a real estate agent with Coastal Properties." Howard stepped forward and extended his hand. "Howard Morrison. This is my wife Eleanor, and my daughter Grace. She's the new owner." Sharon smiled, but her gaze was directed not at Grace but at Olivia, who was standing quietly. Her expression changed. "Ms. Morrison, it's an honor to have you here. We've been looking forward to your arrival." A moment of silence passed. "Ms. Morrison," Howard repeated in a confused voice. "Oh, I'm sorry," Sharon said, looking a bit perplexed. "You're Olivia Morrison, right? The new owner of Coastal Properties and all its assets, including this property." The blood drained from everyone's faces. Grace looked anxiously at her sister, and Eleanor was left speechless. Howard's face contorted with anger and confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" He raised his voice. For the first time, Olivia stepped forward, seemingly undisturbed by the tension in the air. "Ms. Carter, could you show us inside the house? I think that would be the best place to explain." Sharon nodded, sensing the situation, and invited them in. Beyond the entrance stretched a luxurious living room with marble floors and high ceilings. The Pacific Ocean view was visible through large windows, and the room was filled with natural light. "This is surprising," Sharon said. "I had no idea the Morrison family didn't know." "I'm surprised too," Eleanor said coldly. "Olivia, what does this mean?" Olivia stood in the center of the living room and looked around at her family. Emotions she had suppressed for 10 years quietly rose to the surface. "Isn't the view from here wonderful?" she said calmly. "Grace, this is the place you've been dreaming of. A place to paint while watching the sea." "Olivia, explain this immediately," Howard said, unable to contain his anger. "I will explain." Olivia took a deep breath. "I've always been told I have no dreams. That I'm impractical and boring. But I did have a dream. To succeed on my own. And to acquire the company that once bankrupted Dad." Howard's face turned pale. "Yes, I acquired Coastal Properties. It took 10 years, Olivia continued. That small management consulting company was just a front. My real work is real estate investment and corporate acquisitions." "Impossible," Eleanor said in a trembling voice. "You don't have such ability? Or funds?" Olivia smiled. "After college graduation, I started with side jobs. I accumulated profits from small investments, and made the right decisions at the right time. Now, my assets are many times what Dad had at his peak." Grace was stunned but beginning to understand the situation. "So this house is?" "Yes, this house and all the properties are mine," Olivia answered. "Ironically, when Dad and Mom tried to buy it, it was already an asset of my company. You were unknowingly trying to buy from me." Howard collapsed into a chair. "Why? Why do this?" "For revenge." Olivia shook her head. "Maybe I thought so at first. When Dad failed in his deal with Coastal Properties, you used up even my college fund. But you secured Grace's art school tuition at all costs. I took out loans to pay my tuition and worked night shifts for living expenses." Eleanor covered her face with both hands. "We continued to underestimate me," Olivia said quietly. "Practical with no dreams. Live modestly." She took out the memo she received at Christmas. "This is how you evaluated me. Meanwhile, you gave Grace a house worth millions of dollars." "Livy." Grace approached her sister with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know." "It's not your fault," Olivia took her sister's hand. "I just wanted to prove my worth. And now, I've accomplished that." Sharon, sensing the situation, quietly left the room. The 4 members of the Morrison family were left standing in a long silence. So this house. Howard finally spoke. Our contract. The contract is valid, Olivia answered. But for half the amount you are going to pay. The rest is my Christmas present. Why? Eleanor asked with an incredulous expression. Why? Olivia revealed her emotions for the first time. For 10 years, I've worked to prove my worth. To be recognized by my parents. But now I realize that what I was seeking wasn't your approval. It was my own. She approached the window and gazed at the vast Pacific Ocean view. Grace, this house is yours as planned. Use it as a place to let your talent bloom. Grace looked at her sister with a confused expression. But I have another place, Olivia said. This is just one of my assets. Howard stood up and, staggering slightly, faced Olivia. His face bore a complex expression mixing anger, pride, and shame. You, truly are my daughter, he said quietly. I just didn't realize it. For the first time, Olivia was moved by her father's words. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. You're late, Dad, she said, but her voice no longer held the same coldness. 1 year later, Boston's sky was again covered with snow. At the Morrison mansion, Christmas preparations were underway in a different atmosphere than before. Will the white and gold tablecloth be okay? Eleanor asked while on the phone in the living room. Those are Olivia's favorite colors. In this year, the power dynamics of the Morrison family had greatly changed. Weeks after the revelation in Malibu, Howard and Eleanor began to acknowledge their mistakes. Starting with shock and denial, they eventually came to take pride in their daughter's success. Howard in particular was impressed by Olivia's business sense and sometimes sought her advice. Meanwhile, Grace had begun living in the Malibu house and, inspired by her sister's success, had started taking her artistic activities more seriously. With Olivia's support, she opened a small gallery, providing local artists with a place to exhibit. Grace's own works had become more focused, and a few months ago, her first solo exhibition had been successful. I'm here, Olivia's voice came from the entrance. No longer dressed modestly, she wore a sophisticated designer suit and entered the living room with confident steps. Olivia. Eleanor rushed to her daughter and kissed both her cheeks. I'm so glad you came early. Work finished earlier than expected, Olivia smiled. Where's Dad? In his study. He's waiting for you. When she entered Howard's study, he was standing by the window, watching the continuing snowfall. His aged figure looked more like an old man who had felt the weight of life rather than the dignified businessman he once was. Dad, Olivia called out. Olivia, Howard turned around and gave her a gentle smile. Sit down. They sat in armchairs in front of the fireplace. I was wrong, Howard said quietly. I misjudged your worth. That's in the past, Olivia replied. We should move forward. Still, let me say it, tears welled in Howard's eyes. I'm proud of you. You're smarter and stronger than I am. Olivia reached out and took her father's hand. The anger in her heart had gradually softened over this year. In the evening, Grace also returned from California, and the whole family gathered around the dining table. At this year's Christmas dinner, conversation never ceased. They listened to each other talk about Olivia's business, Grace's artistic activities, and their parents' new hobbies. Let's make a toast, Eleanor raised her glass. To our new beginning. Everyone clinked their glasses. We've learned a lot, Eleanor continued. Especially the importance of respecting our children's individuality and choices. After dinner, Olivia sat by the fireplace with a coffee in hand, quietly gazing at the flames. Grace sat down beside her. What are you thinking about? Her sister asked. What makes a real family? Olivia answered. Respecting each other's individuality and choices. And above all, loving each other. Grace rested her head on her sister's shoulder. You taught me that. That strength isn't necessarily power, but being true to yourself. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, and a new chapter of the family's story was about to begin.